Hi, this is Dan McKeown, and this screencast is chapter 2 on my Ryukyu front-end framework for the web. And what specifically I want to talk about in this one is the responsive grid systems that are in the CSS for Ryukyu. Now, there are two of them. One of them conforms with the way that Bootstrap does their grid system, at least to an extent, and the other one is based on newer Flexbox technology. So let's take a look at the Bootstrap CSS. And now we're looking at Bootstrap 3 here, and the grid, is, as described here, uses a series of different classes that you have containing one another, and which will specify the layout. And the nice thing is that it's responsive. So, for example, this page uses Bootstrap CSS, and as you can see, the page is responsive. And so you can lay it out left to right, and on the smaller screens, it'll just go top to bottom. Now, when I was creating Ryukyu, I decided to try to implement the Bootstrap CSS grid system. So, as you can see here, I list on the website that there's conformity to those column names. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to take my local copy of this website here, and I'll load it here, and then I'm going to edit this, and I'm going to swap out the Bootstrap CSS file, and instead I'm going to put in Ryukyu CSS file. So here I have already placed the Ryukyu, the latest CSS code there. So take a look now when we refresh the page. Now, even though it does look different, you can see that the grid system is still laid out roughly in the same way. So let's take a look at the Ryukyu source code. So we look at the CSS here, where it is on GitHub, currently version 0.2.4, and it has a good deal of general CSS, but here we see the beginning of the grid system. So just to show how I set it up, I used inline-block. And so as these different columns line up, they go as far as the screen fits left to right, and then they go down. So I found that this technique works pretty well for implementing the behavior of the Bootstrap grid. The actual width of the columns could be adjusted a little wider to probably conform more exactly, but I was pretty satisfied with the overall ability to lay sites out in a similar way as they had worked with the Bootstrap CSS. Now, there was a second grid system that I created. Now, this one uses Flexbox. That you can see on the Mozilla Developer Network article here, CSS flexible boxes. This is a new built-in tool, but to make a really short story out of it, the code here, if we move down to it, instead of using inline-block, it uses flex. But also, it's important to point out that the flex designation doesn't go to the individual units, it goes to the full container. So here, display flex. This page about the Ryukyu grid system, the Flexbox one, explains here that it has to be contained within the R underscore container, just to set it apart from the Bootstrap conforming system. And then each column uses this type of notation. And when a user designates a div or something with that class, it should be 4 out of 12. So for example, each of these is supposed to be 4 out of 12. Now when we narrow it down, the behavior is a little bit different as it narrows than the inline block, but in the end, the elements contained within Flex manage to act like inline elements when the screen is wider and block elements when the screen is narrower. And so that is a very useful behavior. One warning, currently Safari, as I make this in early September of 2015, Safari doesn't appear to be supporting the Flex. So in fact, the screen looks as though it does when it's narrow, even when it's wide, because the display flex behavior in CSS, I think just hasn't been implemented yet in Safari. So thank you for watching this screencast. If you want to see more, you can subscribe, and you can also check out my website, danmckeown.info.